I suppose I should probably be more excited with it. I've been making videos on my Facebook account for a couple of years. It's probably time I start doing it on Facebook, YouTube. Then you can see why I don't do these on YouTube, where I can be prone to utter ridicule. I can't even form a sentence correctly, and yet somehow I feel qualified to want to talk to you about the road to Wigan Pier. I'm sorry, it's not just Red Dead Redemption videos on here. But I like talking philosophy and things, and I like reading bits from books I bought, so without faffing around too much, I'd like to read one chapter, or, well, let's see how many pages we get through, shall we? Just to see if it makes you want to read this book. I've gone through a couple of pages already. I've seen someone talk about this book. I've been wanting to get it for a long time. It's the guy who wrote Animal Farm. It's a story about him just wandering around and meeting lots of different people and stuff. Like, mostly like working class people. It was his attempt to shed his class prejudice, as he so eloquently refers to it as. Because he was a middle class guy, proper socialist, and he basically didn't want to be one of those toughs who hated the working classes, so he did everything he could to try and like change that by doing like shitty jobs and, you know, hanging out with coal miners and, you know, some of the really horrible jobs and stuff like that. I don't know when this was written. This has got to be early. This is 1930s maybe. Could be 1920s. I don't know. Anyway, let's get on with it, shall we? See what you think. Alright, this is chapter 10 of Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell. Excuse me if I keep smoking in the middle of it. But unfortunately, you do not solve the class problem by making friends with tramps. At most, you get rid of some of your own class prejudice by doing so. Tramps, beggars, criminals, and social outcasts generally are very exceptional beings, and no more typical of the working class as a whole than, say, the literary intelligentsia are typical of the bourgeoisie. It is quite easy to be on terms of intimacy with a foreign, quote-unquote, intellectual. But it is not at all easy to be on terms of intimacy with an ordinary, respectable foreigner of the middle class. How many Englishmen have seen the inside of an ordinary French bourgeois family, for instance? Probably, it would be quite impossible to do so, short of marrying into it. And it is rather similar with the English working class. Nothing is easier than to be bosom pals with a pickpocket, if you know where to look for him. But it's very difficult to be bosom pals with a bricklayer. Where's my lighter? But why is it so easy to be on equal terms with social outcasts? People have often said to me, quote, surely when you're with tramps, they don't really accept you as one of themselves. Surely they notice that you're different, like notice the different of accent, etc., etc. Where did it end the quote? Oh, right, yeah, before etc. Okay. As a matter of fact, a fair proposition of tramps, well over a quarter I should say, notice nothing of the kind. To begin with, many people have no ear for accent and judge you entirely by your clothes. I was often struck by this from the fact I was begging at back doors. Some people were obviously surprised by my educated accent. Others completely failed to notice it. I was dirty and ragged, and that was all they saw. Again, tramps come from all parts of the British Isles, and the variation in English accents is enormous. A tramp is used to hearing all kinds of accents among his mates. Some of them so strange to him that he can hardly understand them. And a man from, say, Cardiff, or Durham, or Dublin, does not necessarily know which of the South accents is an educated one. In any case, men with educated accents, though rare among tramps, are not unknown. But even when tramps are aware that you are of different origin from themselves, it does not necessarily alter their attitude. From their point of view, all that matters is that you, like themselves, are on the bum, quote. And in that world, it is not done to ask too many questions. Sorry, that was my Facebook. I can't escape it. And in that world, oh, I already read that out. You can tell people the history of your life if you choose, and most tramps do so on the smallest provocation. But you are under no compulsion to tell it and whatever story to tell it. Sorry, I find that funny. And whatever story you tell will be accepted without question. Even a bishop could be at home among tramps if he wore the right clothes. And even if they knew he was a bishop, it might not make any difference, provided they also knew, or believed, that he was genuinely destitute. Once you're in a world, and seemingly of it, hardly matters what you have been in the past. It is a sort of world within a world, where everyone is equal, a small, squalid democracy, perhaps the nearest thing to a democracy that exists in England. But when you come to... Excuse me, I was just going to say, of course, this is what, 1920s, 1930s? But when you come to the normal working class, the position is totally different. To begin with, there is no shortcut into their midst. You can become a tramp simply by putting on the right clothes and going to the nearest casual ward, but you can't become a navvy or coal miner. I'm not sure what a navvy is, I should have googled that first. You couldn't get jobs at navvy or coal miner even if you were equal to the work. Via socialist politics, you can get in touch with the working class intelligentsia, but they are hardly more typical than tramps or burglars. For the rest, you can only mingle with the working class by staying in their houses as a lodger, which always has a dangerous resemblance to quote-unquote slumming. For some months, I lived entirely in coal miners' houses. I ate my meals with family, I washed at the kitchen sink, I shared bedrooms with miners, drank beer with them, played darts with them, talked to them by the hour together. But though I was among them, and I hope and trust they did not find me a nuisance, I was not one of them. I know I shouldn't look to the camera, I've lost my place. And they knew it, even better than I did. However much you like them, however interesting you find their conversation, there is always that accursed itch of class difference. Like the pea under the princess's mattress, it is not a question of dislike or distaste, only of difference. But it is enough to make real intimacy impossible. Even with miners who described themselves as communists, I found that it needed tactful manoeuvrings to prevent them from calling me sir, and all of them, except in moments of great animation, softened their northern accents for my benefit. I like them and hope they like me. Shit, I've done it again. Right, where are we? But I went among them as a foreigner, and both of us were aware of it. Whichever way you turn this curse of class difference confronts you like... Whichever way you turn this curse of class difference confronts you like a wolf stone. Or rather, it's not so much like a stone wall as the plated glass pane of an aquarium. It is so easy to pretend that it isn't there, and so impossible to get through it. Unfortunately, it is nowadays the fashion to pretend that the glass is penetrable. Of course, everyone knows that class prejudice exists, but at the same time everyone claims that he, in some mysterious way, is exempt from it. Snobbishness is one of those vices which we can discern in everyone else, but never in ourselves. Not only the croyant et pratiquant, I could be butchering that, I assume it's French, croyant et pratiquant socialist, but every intellectual, quote-unquote, takes it as a matter of course that he is at least outside the class bracket. He, unlike his neighbours, can see through the absurdity of wealth, ranks, titles, etc., etc. I'm not a snob. It's nowadays a kind of universal credo. Who is there who has not jeered at the House of Lords, the military caste, the royal family, the public schools, the hunting and shooting people? There's no G at the end of there, it's very American. The old ladies in Cheltenham boarding houses, the horrors of country society and the social hierarchy generally. To do so has become an automatic gesture. You notice this particularly in novels. Every novelist of serious pretensions adopts an ironic attitude towards his upper class characters. Indeed, when a novelist has to put a definitely upper class person, a duke or a baronet or whatnot, into his stories, he guides them more or less instinctively. There is an important subsidiary cause of this in the poverty of the modern upper-class dialect. The speech of educated people is now so lifeless and characterless that a novelist can do nothing with it. By far the easiest way of making it amusing is to burlesque it, which means pretending that every upper-class person is an ineffectual ass. The trick is imitated from novelist to novelist, and in the end it becomes almost a reflex action, like a positive feedback loop. And yet all the while, at the bottom of his heart, everyone knows that this is humbug. We all rail against class distinctions, but very few people seriously want to abolish them. Here you come upon the important fact that every revolutionary opinion draws part of its strength from a secret conviction that nothing can be changed. If you want a good illustration of this, it is worth studying the novels and plays of John Galsworthy, keeping one eye on their chronology. Galsworthy is a very fine specimen of the thin-skinned, tear-in-the-eye pre-war humanitarian. He starts out with a morbid pity complex, which extends even to thinking that every married woman is an angel chained to a satyr. He is in a perpetual quiver of indignation over the sufferings of overworked clerks, of underpaid farmhands, of fallen women, of criminals, of prostitutes, of animals, the world, as he sees it in his earlier books, The Man of Property, Justice, etc., is divided into oppressors and oppressed, with the oppressors sitting on top like some monstrous stone idol which all the dynamite in the world cannot overthrow. But is it so certain that he really wants it overthrown? On the contrary, in his fight against an unimmovable... I was doing so well. In his fight against an immovable tyranny, he is upheld by the consciousness that it is immovable. When things happen unexpectedly and the world order which he has known begins to crumble, he feels somewhat differently about it. So, having set out to be the champion of the underdog against tyranny and injustice, he ends by advocating, vide the silver spoon, that the English working class, to cure their economic ills, shall be deported to the colonies like batches of cattle. If he had lived 10 years longer, he would quite probably have arrived at some genteel version of fascism. This is the inevitable face of the sentimentalist. All his opinions change into their opposites at the first brush of reality. I think we'll leave it there. Maybe that's convinced you somewhat. This book is about the fact that he wanted to shed his bourgeois status and really understand or actuate on behalf of the working classes. But in order to do that, it made him realise something about himself. The Socialist Book Club he wrote this for enjoyed the first half of the book, but didn't like the second half. Because in it, after seeing some pretty horrible things, I mean, he said to himself, you know, how can you not argue for social programs? You know, he considered himself a socialist, but he hated the socialists he hung out with. And he couldn't understand why. And in this book, he finds out why. And the TLDR, if you don't have time to read a book like this, is that he realised that the vast majority of the socialists, he came to the conclusion they weren't there because they loved the working class. They were there because they hated the rich, the few people in society, the upper classes, the ones above the middle classes. You know, they were in the top 10%, but they hated the 1%. Because they were, although these people were really well off, there was somebody out there better off than them. And, well, you know, villains who twirl their moustaches are easy to spot. Those who clothe themselves in the guise of compassion and inclusivity are, well, camouflaged. It's something to think about. Okay, that was it. That was my first video actually speaking on here. I hope you enjoyed it more than me shooting people in the testicles with an incendiary buckshot, but you're probably going to see more of those go on my Facebook. Oh, God. YouTube, young man. Well, let's enjoy it while it lasts. If I do any more political videos, I'm sure I'm probably going to get banned, and then I'll join the band club along with everybody else. Oh well. God willing, some good shit should come out of this. Take care, everyone.